When I bought the 6-acre stretch up in North Georgia, I thought I was finally trading in the chaos for calm. My name's Zach West, 39 years old, former mechanical engineer, now a remote CAD consultant. After 10 years spent wrangling deadlines and slogging through traffic in Atlanta's Midtown, I was finished. I wanted solitude. I wanted trees. What I didn't want, and didn't expect, was Pine Brook. The land had once belonged to a retired forest ranger. Kept to himself. No family. Died during a harsh winter. The lot was narrow and deep. A weathered old home tucked in among pecan and pine trees, with just enough clearing to catch the shimmer of highway lights off in the distance. What I didn't realize right away was that my land happened to lie right between the backside of Pine Brook, a pristine, gate-guarded subdivision, and the main road. In their eyes, it wasn't land. It was a shortcut. There was a rough trail through my woods, nearly hidden in the underbrush. I noticed it the first time I walked the property, figured it was nothing. Maybe an old utility path or where deer passed through. Some parts were so overgrown the weeds came up to my waist. But now and then, I'd catch movement. People out jogging, walking their dogs, slipping through the trees like shadows. They'd nod like old friends and mumble a thank you, disappearing without explanation. I assumed they had some sort of deal with the previous owner. And honestly, at first, I let it go. I wasn't trying to be that neighbor. But then Karen Elbridge got elected. She took charge of Pine Brook's HOA like she was launching a corporate takeover. Her first act? Something she proudly called civic connectivity. A fancy name for bulldozing private land. I only found out about it after getting back from a trip to Tennessee to find part of my property looking like it had been hit by a road crew. The old path was now a broad gravel strip, nearly 12 feet across. Trees had been cut down. Stumps littered the sides. A plastic sign had been planted like a flag. Community Access Path, Safety Enhancement Initiative. I stared at the wreckage. Ferns flattened, boundary markers gone, and one of my private property signs tossed in a bush like trash. And standing there, like she owned the damn forest, was Karen. Bleach blonde bob, clipboard in hand, pointing things out to a contractor like she was directing a play. I approached calmly, holding back the fire. Mind telling me why there's heavy machinery on my land? I asked. She blinked, then smiled like someone trying to sell you a used car with a blown engine. Oh, Zach, you weren't supposed to be back until Thursday. We're just starting work on the neighborhood path. Isn't it wonderful? You're standing on private land, I said flatly. She waved toward the gravel like it was obvious. We're not paving anything, just cleaning up a route that's been used for years. It's practically community tradition. Tradition isn't ownership, I replied. She gave me a look like I was a stubborn child. Well, if you'd be willing to grant an easement, we could make all this official and avoid complications. Complications. That was her word. Like this wasn't a land grab. Like I was the problem. I looked past her at the cleared trail, at the pieces of my property now claimed by strangers. It hit me like cold water. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a quiet invasion, and I had been too damn civil. So the next morning I got to work. By noon, I had a local metalworker on site with a welding crew. They brought in a custom steel gate, 10 feet high, solid tubing, reinforced hinges, keypad lock. We planted it directly across the gravel track, right at the property line. No confusion, no excuses. I added motion-activated lights, security cameras feeding straight to my phone, and new warning signs that made things unmistakably clear. These weren't the polite kind. These signs didn't suggest you were unwelcome. They promised legal consequences. I didn't want to fight, but I wasn't about to let anyone walk all over me. The response was faster than I expected. Next morning, I opened the security app and froze. Spray paint, thick, white, and dripping, covered both panels of the gate. HOA access. A laminated sign dangled on a chain. Emergency exit, authorized use only. I knew who did it before I even rolled back the footage. There she was, Karen. Hoodie up, gloves on, sneaking around like she was breaking into a spy base. 1:37 a.m. clear as day on infrared. Not long after, I heard voices. Loud ones. Karen had returned, this time with 2 HOA board members and some guy in business casual holding a folder like it made him important. They stood just outside the gate, phones pointed like weapons, filming themselves in outrage. "This is a safety issue," Karen yelled. The camera wasn't just for security anymore. It had become a witness. A silent sentinel documenting every escalation in what was fast becoming a neighborhood circus. I stepped outside, leaning against my fence, just in time to catch Karen mid-rant about public safety. "What if there's a fire? What if someone needs an ambulance?" she shrieked, gesturing wildly at the locked gate. "You mean the fire trucks that come down the actual paved road and not this dirt shortcut across private land?" I asked calmly. She spun around like I'd insulted her ancestors. "You're putting Pinebrook at risk." I raised an eyebrow. Then maybe Pinebrook residents should stop pretending they have a stake in my backyard. That one hit a nerve. She stormed off to make another call to the sheriff's office. In under 20 minutes, 2 deputies rolled up. They were polite, professional, and clearly sick of being referees in what had become the neighborhood's favorite feud. One deputy took my statement while the other listened to Karen unload her usual list. Blocked exits, old residents in danger, and, my favorite, that I was undermining the spirit of the community. When asked if my land was part of Pinebrook or bound by HOA rules, I handed over my deed. No easements, no restrictions, no shared access. Karen, in contrast, had brought a printout of a map with a bright red line drawn across my property, like that somehow made it law. The deputy glanced at it, nodded with diplomatic indifference, and they left. Karen didn't. She planted herself outside my gate, still on her phone, shouting at what I could only assume was either the mayor or a higher power. That evening, I found a city planning notice taped to my mailbox. Karen had officially complained. According to her, my gate was obstructing an essential emergency escape route, vital to regional safety, no less. Suddenly, my bumpy little trail was being treated like a state highway. I sat at the table, rereading the city letter while the camera footage looped on my monitor. There she was again, tagging my gate like it was a subway car and she was marking her territory. It wasn't about a trail. Not really. This was about control. About a woman so used to bending the neighborhood to her will that she couldn't stand someone telling her no. She'd made my gate into a battleground. Within days, the online attacks started. A local Facebook group I never joined, *Neighbors for Common Access*, suddenly lit up with activity. My gate became a public enemy. Posts were vicious. *Selfish man locks community out, puts lives at risk. *One post had a zoomed-in photo of my porch with the caption, "Is this who we want near our children?" Karen heart reacted nearly every comment. Then came the flyers, tucked under my windshield at the grocery store, posted on the community bulletin board, slipped into mailboxes. They all demanded the same thing. Remove the gate, restore the path, do your part. It was surreal. Cars slowed down near my property. Teenagers lingered at the edge of my yard. One afternoon, they threw rocks at the security camera. When I came out, one of them flipped me off and bolted. Another left behind a cardboard sign jammed into the ground. "This land is for everyone." That's when I called John Hanley, property attorney from Dahlonega, the kind of lawyer who dressed like a banker and spoke like a bouncer. He went through my paperwork, checked the plats from the 80s, and came back with a verdict. "You're solid. They have nothing but noise." Still, this wasn't just about facts. It was about perception, and Karen was playing a long game. So we called in Sienna, a no-nonsense field biologist who looked like she'd just walked off a forestry trail. She did one walkthrough of the path and said, "You've got flying squirrels." I blinked. "Come again. They're nesting in the trail. Southern flying squirrels. Protected under Georgia law." A week later, I had a notarized environmental report in hand. Any tampering with the trail would violate state wildlife protections. It was a win, a small one. Karen, of course, responded by proposing a revision to the HOA charter. She wanted to create a mandatory emergency easement through any property deemed historically accessed. The language was vague, legalistic, and laced with veiled threats. And then she doubled down. There she was on the local news, smiling for the cameras outside the Pinebrook Community Center, surrounded by signs and supporters, promising to restore safety and unity through accessible infrastructure. She wasn't just attacking my gate. She was using it to build a political platform. Out of equal parts curiosity and irritation, I started digging through the archives at the county clerk's office. And then I found it. A document buried in an old folder. A mention of a handshake agreement from 1991 between the original owner of my land and Pinebrook's first HOA leader. Nothing legal, nothing filed. Just a brief note in an engineer's memo referencing temporary survey forgiveness during early neighborhood development. No signatures, no binding terms, just a shadow of a deal. But that was enough for people like Karen. She wasn't going to stop, but neither was I. They never had the right to build that trail, did it anyway, banking on the silence of an old man who never protested. But now I had the proof to expose the lie, scrawled faintly in pencil more than 30 years ago. Karen's entire campaign had been propped up by fiction, and I was ready to dismantle it. It happened just after sunrise on a Tuesday. I was halfway into my coffee, fog curling low across the treeline, when I heard the rumble. Deep, mechanical, and entirely out of place. Not from the county road. Not even close. That sound was coming from within my land. I threw on boots, shrugged into a hoodie, grabbed my phone, and jogged the path behind the house. Diesel fumes hung in the air. Voices filtered through the woods. When I hit the old trail, my gut twisted. A yellow backhoe had already breached my gate. One side hung crooked, hinge bent. The keypad dangled, wires exposed like the guts of a gutted fish. Fresh gravel covered the wild ground cover I'd preserved for years. 5 men in reflective vests moved with urgency, expanding the trail like it was part of some state-funded project. I stepped into the path. "Hey!" I yelled. "You looking to get sued or just don't know how to read no trespassing signs?" One of them, probably the foreman, turned around, startled. "Sir, we're working under Pinebrook's contract. We've got a signed work order. President Elbridge authorized it." "This is private land," I snapped. "You see Pinebrook anywhere on my deed? You think she owns this lot?" He faltered. "She said the HOA had right of access. Said the property was under review." I didn't wait for the rest. I turned and sprinted back to the house, already dialing the sheriff. Inside, I jumped to my camera system. There it was, clear as day, the moment the machine smashed through my gate. The gravel drop. The crew pouring in like it was a sanctioned operation. And there, front and center, stood Karen. Heels on gravel, clipboard in hand, beaming like she was cutting the ribbon on a community center. By the time deputies arrived, the damage was done. My gate, mangled. 30 feet of forest. Stripped. Survey markers, trampled. Native saplings, gone. And Karen? Nowhere in sight. The crew stood off to the side, shuffling uneasily while I showed the footage. To their credit, the deputies didn't pretend it was some neighborly miscommunication. They took notes, took pictures, even marked off the dumped gravel like a crime scene. But they reminded me it wasn't criminal. Not yet. If I wanted justice, I'd need to take it to court. That night I sat in the dark, whiskey in hand, seething. She'd crossed the line, moved from posturing to property damage. From veiled threats to open force. I was done playing nice, done assuming good faith. The next morning, I walked into Hanley's law office, dropped a thick folder on his desk, and said, "We don't hold back." He gave one firm nod. "Then we bury them." We filed 5 charges that same week. Deliberate trespassing, destruction of land, attempted forced easement, public slander, and intentional emotional harm. Each count backed with hard evidence. Video timestamps, signed statements, land records, and one dusty 1991 memo I'd pulled from a forgotten archive that proved the trail had never been granted right-of-way. We named everyone. Karen Elbridge as the ringleader. The entire HOA board for greenlighting it. The contractor for plowing ahead without checking ownership. Even included a placeholder for any ghostwriter who doctored the access document. Once the sheriff's office finalized their report, the media got wind. A local blogger published first, "Neighborhood HOA accused of bulldozing private property." By nightfall, my phone buzzed nonstop, calls from news outlets, follow-up questions, requests for interviews. That clip, Karen's smug smile as the gate crumbled, was everywhere. She tried to spin it, held a press conference, blamed a mix-up, claimed the HOA never meant to be aggressive. But video doesn't lie, and neither did her grin. I wouldn't have gone quietly, and neither did she. Lawsuits affect people differently. Some retreat, others double down. Karen? She turned it into performance art. Within days of filing, my mailbox became a revolving door of legal threats and petty propaganda. There was a denial from the HOA's lawyer. "We dispute the claims in full." Then a packet from the HOA itself. Asterisk community rebuttal. The truth about the trail. Asterisk and the piece de resistance. A grainy black and white flyer titled, Asterisk, is your neighbor suing you? Asterisk featuring an unflattering photo of me with a bold caption. Asterisk he blocked emergency access. What else will he deny you? Asterisk. First I laughed. Then I saw the flyers everywhere, community boards, mailroom lobbies, even taped to the window of a gas station 3 miles away. But I wasn't worried. I had Hanley, and Hanley was relentless. He tore through their paper trail like a predator, filed motions to compel discovery, requested everything: maps, board emails, contractor invoices. The results were astonishing. Buried in their records were emails between Karen and board members, openly strategizing. One said, Asterisk, even if we're pushing boundaries, he can't afford to fight us forever. Asterisk, there was even a project plan for a green walk corridor, dated 2 months before they bulldozed through my land. The route was clearly drawn through my lot. No easement, no permits, no request for consent. But the smoking gun didn't come from paperwork. It came from a man named Will Denton, the HOA's former treasurer. He arrived unannounced at Hanley's office, nervous, tie askew, hands shaking as he clutched a thumb drive like it could burn him. He'd quit 2 weeks earlier after Karen allegedly asked him to reallocate general maintenance funds to pay for the trail work, without a vote. I couldn't do it anymore, he said. On that drive, minutes from an off-the-books board meeting, raw clubhouse surveillance footage showing Karen rehearsing her speech before the gate was even touched, and best of all, a draft of the forged trail access map. The original line was digitally erased beneath the fake one, like a magic trick undone. I decided it was time to speak publicly. From my porch, I held a press cue / and I wasn't chasing headlines, I was setting the record straight. I laid out everything. The environmental damage, the forged map, the false emergency narrative. Sienna, the biologist, joined me and didn't hold back. You don't bulldoze habitat for federally protected species and call it neighborly, she said. That was the turning point. Public sentiment flipped. Local news ran the story. Even neighbors who'd avoided the conflict started reaching out. Some with apologies, a few with pies. I'm not kidding. Someone brought a pecan pie. Eventually, the county announced a formal review of the HOA's status. Karen's once unshakable influence began to unravel. And that's when the vandalism began. My mailbox smashed. Twice. My truck, keyed. Asterisk community trader asterisk scratched into the paint. My gate egged so often it looked like it belonged on a movie set. I documented everything. Filed every police report. The cameras caught it all, including 2 HOA board members planting fake restoration access signs in front of my property. 3 in the morning. Hanley updated the lawsuit to include new claims: defamation, harassment, civil conspiracy. The trial was inevitable, and Karen knew it. She smiled for the cameras, but the tension in her eyes betrayed her. The courtroom was standing room only. News vans lined the street. One table outside even sold Pinebrook-branded tote bags like this was a charity bake sale, not a civil trial. I walked past it all, focused. Karen showed up looking like she was ready to conquer a nation. Shoulders squared, hair lacquered. Legal team lined up behind her like a military parade. She didn't glance my way. The judge, Clearly a man with no patience for theatrics, called us to order. Hanley opened with what he called the domino of stupidity. He walked the jury through every misstep. Unauthorized excavation, property damage, fake signage, forged documents, vandalism, arrogance. Then came the videos. The room gasped as footage played of Karen painting HOA access on my gate, beaming like it was a ribbon cutting. Then the video of the backhoe. My gate crumpling under the weight of it, steel screeching. Karen's center frame, clipboard in hand. Her attorneys argued it was for community benefit, that the path had precedent. But under cross-examination, their narrative crumbled. Hanley handed the contractor the forged map. Did you verify the property lines before starting work? No. Did you get written consent from the landowner? No. Did you know you were trespassing? Not at the time. When did you find out? When he showed us the deed. Then Sienna returned, this time with a blown-up poster board of protected species nests. These, she said, are federally protected flying squirrel nests. Heavy machinery passed within 4 feet of them. Karen's house of cards collapsed in full view. The lawyer had tried to dismiss the whole thing with a smirk. And how many squirrels are we talking about? He asked flippantly. Sienna didn't flinch. She leaned forward and answered, enough to get your client hit with a 5-figure fine if she ever pulls that stunt again. Then we brought in Will Denton, the former treasurer. Under oath, he laid it all out. Misuse of HOA funds, falsified internal votes, shady backroom deals. He even recalled something Karen had said during a board meeting. Don't worry, he'll cave. Nobody wants to go to war with their neighbors. I looked straight at her when he said it. For the first time, her confident mask cracked. Then I took the stand. Calm, deliberate. I spoke of the nights I couldn't sleep. The constant pressure. The humiliation of seeing flyers plastered with my face calling me a danger to the community. I described watching strangers trample what I'd built. Not just the gate, but the peace, the solitude, the very sense of home that brought me there in the first place. Their legal team tried to frame me as antisocial, a loner who didn't want to contribute to the neighborhood. I answered with evidence, photographs, receipts, law. Then I ended with one sentence I let hang like a dropped weight. Being a neighbor doesn't entitle you to be a thief. The closing arguments were dramatic. Hanley, my attorney, delivered his like a finishing blow. This isn't about a trail. It's about arrogance dressed in HOA credentials. The jury was out less than 2 hours. When they returned, the decision was unanimous. Karen Elbridge, guilty of trespassing, defamation, property destruction, conspiracy, and fraud. 3 board members were found responsible for aiding the mess. The contractor who built the trail was held liable for negligence. The court awarded me $270,000, $70,000 for repairs and land restoration, $200,000 for emotional distress and legal fees. But the judge went further. He ordered the HOA to stop all action related to the trail, permanently. Any attempt to revive it would be considered criminal contempt. Karen didn't move as the ruling was read aloud. Her jaw tensed, and when her lawyer tried to console her with a hand on her shoulder, she yanked away like he'd shocked her. Outside, reporters crowded in. Cameras flashed. Microphones shoved in my face. I gave a single statement. Property rights aren't optional. They're not a suggestion. And if you think a clipboard and a homeowner's title make you immune to the law, think again. Karen said nothing. She pushed through the press with her head down, chased by the very media storm she once used against me. From that moment forward, the gate stood firm. About a month later, I installed a new sign. Nothing fancy. Brushed metal, neatly engraved. I mounted it myself. It read, "Private Reserve, not a shortcut." Nobody ever touched it. The land was quiet again. The breeze no longer felt like it carried tension through the trees. It was like the forest had let out a breath it had been holding for years. I walked the boundary most evenings now, not in fear, but out of habit. Just me, the distant call of owls, and the crunch of gravel beneath my boots. Karen moved away shortly after. No farewell posts, no goodbyes, just silence. Rumor was she relocated to Florida. The HOA went silent too. Meetings were canceled. Then finally, a new board was elected. A soft-spoken woman named Elise took the lead. One of her first acts was a letter to the neighborhood. "We were wrong. We're sorry." I framed it. The path had vanished, overgrown with moss and new saplings. Unless you knew what to look for, you'd never guess it had been the center of a bitter war. Still, sometimes people stopped by. A couple from Pinebrook brought brownies, said they'd voted against Karen. Another neighbor dropped off a bottle of red with a handwritten note. "Thanks for standing up when the rest of us were scared." And then there was a boy, couldn't have been older than 10. Rolled up on a bright green bike, parked by the gate, and just stared. I was outside with a wrench in one hand and the hose in the other. "You Mr. West?" he asked. "Last I checked. My dad says you stopped the whole neighborhood from stealing your land." I smiled. "That's one way to say it." He pointed at the sign. "So no one's allowed to walk here anymore?" I thought for a second. "Only the ones who ask first." He nodded like that made perfect sense, then pedaled off without another word. That evening I sat on the porch with something strong in my glass and watched the last sliver of daylight vanish behind the pines. The gate was closed. The sign was clear. The land was mine again, not just on paper but in soul. People say fences make good neighbors. Maybe, but sometimes they make better stories. And mine began with a trail and ended with a line no one dared cross again.